Yeah, I have a question about school systems. So if the school gets shut down because it's doing very poorly, the students that do go to that school, are they redistributed to other schools?
Yes, in some cases they are sent to other schools. Sometimes parents will get the option of sending them to a school that has it better, but it's a tough process and it breaks up communities. Sometimes schools are shut down for good reasons and sometimes they're not. And it certainly does redistribute them into new networks. Yes?
The rating system where you guys got the A, math and literacy, is that the only benchmark that the school is measured on?
Yeah. Basically, they tell us to analyze, test that all the time. And when it comes to talking to science and social studies teachers, they're like, oh, we're not even going to get your data for a while. It doesn't matter. Yeah, that's what it's based off of, math and literacy. And those are very important subjects. But there's math and literacy in science. There's math and literacy in social studies. And I think basically this is the problem, that the people who make the policies in this country have no idea about education. They are not educators. They have not stepped foot in a classroom since perhaps they were educated. Yeah.
I don't really have a question. I just want to agree with you for a second. I hang out with Sustain Mizzou, so I hang out with a lot of kids that have been through a lot of programs like yours, or at least appear to. They really know what's going on with a lot of this stuff. And I grew up, like all of my elementary schools in South City, St. Louis, in public schools that weren't worth a damn. So I don't know these things. And my biggest struggle from the kind of as an adult is like relearning all these basic fundamental environmental things that could have been taught with a field trip to the Bronx Zoo or something.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's especially important. It's important for all students. It doesn't matter where you are, but 50% of the world lives in cities today. It's so important to engage students in the city as well. Again, how can they care about wildlife in Africa or South America or in the Bronx if they've never even seen it or they don't even know about it? They don't even know the names. Yeah.
Do you feel like you needed to be an expert in these subjects before you took kids out?
Absolutely not. I learned a lot taking them out. This trip was last year. I've been bird watching for maybe a year. And so I got my field guide in my pocket, making sure that I'm getting everything correct. But no, absolutely not. I think part of the important part of doing this is the process of discovery for adults and children. If you take someone out, a kid, and you don't know anything about it, that's something that you go through together. And that has a lot of value for all parties involved.
So it shouldn't be a barrier that you don't know any birds?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I said I didn't know a lot about rocks. I looked it up and did the best that I could to help the student identify it. But that's what it is. You use the best available evidence and work through it. And I think communicating that process to students, you don't have to be an expert. Nobody starts as an expert. You learn as you go. I think that's a very important thing for students and adults to learn too. Yeah.
Has your principal changed your perspective on education or these field trips after she's seen the results of your students?
Yeah, my school's very supportive of what I've done. At first they were a little nervous about it, but they're very supportive now. I think they understand that it's working. Unfortunately, they're not able to get around the policies that they have to follow. If our test scores go down, our administrators could lose their jobs. So, they're part of that system. Until that system changes, they're going to have to emphasize testing policies as well. Yeah.
You mentioned that New York State is a leader as far as the testing system is concerned.
But it is like educational.
Yeah, educational.
Yeah.
What would that mean if other states looked at that and said, "Oh, New York's doing a great job as far as math and science scores"? What would that mean for the other math and science programs for the other states? If say Missouri looked at that and went, "Oh, that's awesome," and what would that mean?
I think it could be devastating to our educational system. There have always been problems, and there's going to be problems in anything. Always been problems in education. Right now, the focus is on this idea that we need to hold everybody accountable, which is a great idea. But the way that they hold people accountable is just by basically one test a year. And plenty of studies have shown that testing really doesn't engage other people's intelligences. Like, it fits certain types of people, and it doesn't fit others. And so, if other states were to see, oh, New York's doing a great job, let's emulate that system, I think they're going to really hurt their educational system as well. Yeah?
The Chinese population consists of one-fifth of the world population, and now due to the quick development and also urbanization in China, natural lands and forests not in the city in China. So in such situations, how can we get students to get access to the nature system, and how can we just let them learn more about nature with no such conditions? And also in China, it's really a situation that testing is everything in education. So how can you interact as a government to maybe incorporate that into the educational system?
Two questions. I'll take the first one first. Opportunities in a very developed area. This is New York City. This is the Bronx, the most expensive real estate in the country. You would think going to New York City there is no nature there. I came from Missouri. There's plenty of nature around, and I hadn't yet developed these interests. But I think what is interesting is there are pockets of it. Birds have to migrate. They're going to go somewhere. And this is going to be true in North America, in Asia, in Africa, even in very, very developed areas. There are pockets of nature. I mean, even just the trees that are in the tree pits along the street, there is an opportunity to learn about something outdoors. Now, I don't know about specific cities, and it may be tougher in some than others, but I mean, if we can make this happen in the Bronx, then I think you can make it happen in most areas. Now, as far as working with the government goes, I think democracy is very important for enabling people to do this kind of work, and I don't know how you would address that situation with the Chinese government. I know, like for instance, going to other countries, you have to be very careful about making a stand, about doing things. I mean, if you're out there in the streets, you're obviously getting noticed, but if you're doing something like this, it may fall under the radar. But you do have to be careful when going to other countries. I think that's something important to keep in mind. Any other questions?
Have you seen the math and literacy results for your students from the classroom? Have they increased?
It's another interesting thing about testing is it's so tough to tell. How did this happen? Why are they doing so well? We don't know why. Was it our instruction? Was it some experience they've had before? It's not easy to trace those things. So I have seen our test scores. Obviously, they're very good. We got an A. When I taught 7th grade math, 50% of my students made growth, and everyone scored at least on state level, which is great. But one of the things that was really kind of took away from it for me is when we tried to do hands-on projects, they couldn't apply what they were learning. They didn't know which mathematic principles to apply. They just said, oh, we can do this test, give us multiple choice, and we'll do it. But then when it came on the hands-on, really, solving problems like what doctors and engineers and people in the real world do, they had trouble with it. And that's the biggest problem with testing, is that it puts the emphasis on, oh, if you can answer these questions, you know the material. No, you don't. You don't know the material. You don't necessarily know how to apply it. It's just one indicator of learning. Yeah?
You, with the worms, you were able to use that experiential learning opportunity and apply it to state standards. Is there support within the state standards as far as what you cover for experiential learning?
I think that basically the way it works is the state puts out standards. And they say, this is what you have to teach. They don't necessarily tell you how to teach it. So that's where I can bring in the worms. A lot of times, it's easier for schools, it's easier for teachers, administrators to buy something that's already developed, to buy a test prep booklet or a textbook that has everything that you could possibly need. And if the teachers and administrators really aren't that familiar with that system, it's going to hurt the education that they can give their students. So I think it's really important. That's something that I'm looking into, is expanding this, getting these kind of ideas like working with the worms, like taking kids out to the parks to other teachers. And that kind of sharing of information is very, very important for teachers. Sure.
I'll just make an announcement.
Sure.
There is a Missouri Environmental Education Association, which has a list of all of the kinds of curricula and activities that Jared talked about. And you can go to the website. It's www.mea